so you want to start a clothing brand. Design a hoodie, put it on a website, watch the orders come in. A shirt that cost you $12 to make, you sell for $60. That is not a small profit. That is a margin most industries would kill for. 80% on paper, before you have spent a single dollar on anything else. And that number is real. It is also almost completely useless because it is measuring the wrong thing. Here is the actual shape of the business. In direct-to-consumer fashion, brands reported average gross margins of somewhere between 65 and 75% in 2023. Sounds incredible. But once you strip out everything hidden underneath that number, net profit margins for most of those same brands fell under 10%. Some never got there at all. So here is the real question. If the markup on clothing is this generous, why do most new fashion brands go bankrupt within 3 years of launching? Look at the two ends of the spectrum. Gymshark started in a garage in Birmingham, England, in 2012, printing logos onto gym clothes by hand. By 2020, it had a valuation north of $1 billion. By its 2024 fiscal year, it was pulling in over £600 million in revenue. Meanwhile, in that same stretch, between 2020 and 2024, hundreds of nearly identical activewear brands on Shopify quietly shut their doors. Same industry, same margins on paper, wildly different outcomes. Part of why this keeps happening is that the barrier to entry basically doesn't exist anymore. Shopify and TikTok let anyone open a store in an afternoon. In 2022 alone, over 1.7 million new clothing stores launched around the world. Most of them never crossed 100 total sales ever. First-time founders make the same mistake almost every time. They take the cost of the product, they take the retail price, they subtract one from the other, and they call that the profit. That number is fiction. The real business lives entirely outside of it. So where does the money actually go? The hoodie that quietly costs 3 times what you think start with the $12 hoodie. Made in a factory in Bangladesh or in Guangzhou, China. $12 landed cost at the factory gate. That's the number every new founder falls in love with. But the hoodie doesn't teleport from the factory floor to your customer's doorstep. It has to travel, and travel is not free. Ship it by sea, and you're paying somewhere between $4 and $6 a unit with a transit time of 20 to 40 days. Need it faster? Air freight will run you $8 to $15 a unit, sometimes more, depending on how badly you need it and how much everyone else needs cargo space at the same time. Then it hits the border. The United States charges import duties on apparel that range from 16 to 32%, depending on the fabric. On a $12 hoodie, that's another $3 to $5 gone before it's even touched a warehouse shelf. Speaking of the warehouse, somebody has to store this thing and pack it when an order comes in. Third-party logistics companies, the kind that fulfill orders for small brands, charge on average $2.50 to $5 per unit for storage and fulfillment combined. Then the sale happens, and even the moment of getting paid costs money. Stripe and most payment processors take 2.9% of the transaction plus 30 cents. On a $60 sale, that's a bit over $2, gone instantly, automatically, every single time. Add branded packaging, a return label tucked inside the box just in case, and a small reserve set aside for the item to come back damaged, and you're looking at another $3 to $8 per unit, and then there's the return itself. Fashion sold online gets returned at a rate of 20 to 40%. Compare that to a physical store where returns sit at 5 to 9%. Nearly 1 in 3 online sales comes back. When it does, you keep almost none of the associated costs. The outbound shipping, the payment processing fee, the packaging, none of that gets refunded to you. You eat it, add it all together, and that $12 hoodie has quietly become a $30 to $40 hoodie. Before a single cent goes toward telling anyone it exists. If the product itself eats up half the $60 price tag, what's left is thin. And the thing that eats the rest of it hasn't even shown up yet. The customer cost you more than he spent. Here's where most brands actually die. Not in the factory, in the advertising account. Getting a stranger on the internet to become a paying customer is called customer acquisition, and the cost of doing that has been climbing for a decade. In 2015, acquiring a customer for a clothing brand through Facebook or Instagram ads cost around $12. By 2024, that same customer costs somewhere between $30 and $60, sometimes more. A big reason for that jump has a specific date attached to it. In April of 2021, Apple released an update to its operating system that let iPhone users opt out of being tracked across apps. Most of them did. Somewhere close to 3/4 of users worldwide switched tracking off. That single decision blinded advertising platforms. They could no longer see nearly as clearly who was likely to buy something, which meant brands had to spend 2 to 3 times more money to get the same number of sales they used to get for less. Now run the math on one transaction. A $60 hoodie. Real landed cost around $35. That leaves $25 of what looks like profit. But if it costs you $45 in advertising just to bring that one customer to your website, you didn't make $25. You lost $20. On the sale that was supposed to be your win, brands try to get around this by paying influencers directly instead of running programmatic ads. A single mid-tier influencer post might cost $5,000 flat. Sometimes it converts beautifully. Sometimes it produces zero sales. Because the influencer's audience was never actually interested in buying anything, they were just interested in the influencer. And cold traffic, meaning people who've never heard of you and are seeing your ad for the first time, converts into a sale only about 1 to 2% of the time. 98 to 99% of every dollar spent reaching new people produces no revenue at all. Founders, excited by early traction, often pour $10,000 to $50,000 into ads before they've actually proven anyone besides their friends and family wants the product. They're scaling a fire before checking if there's any wood underneath it. If nearly every new customer costs you money the first time they buy from you, how does anyone in this business survive? Wylosing money. On-per is sometimes the actual plan. Here's the part that sounds insane until you see the mechanism behind it. Some of the biggest companies in the world got there by deliberately losing money on the first purchase. Amazon built an empire on exactly this idea. Spend more to acquire a customer than that first order is worth. Because the goal was never the first order. The goal is every order after it. This is measured as lifetime value. If losing $40 gets you a customer who comes back and buys from you 4 separate times, you didn't lose $40. You made closer to $120. The tool that makes this work is email and text marketing. Platforms like Klaviyo, built specifically for this, can generate 30 to 40% of total revenue for an established brand, and it costs almost nothing per message compared to advertising. No auction, no bidding against competitors for attention. Just a list of people who already bought something once. The catch is that most customers never give you the chance to email them twice. Repeat purchase rates in apparel sit around 20 to 30%, which means 70 to 80% of the people you paid so much to acquire buy exactly one time and vanish. Some brands try subscriptions to lock in that second purchase automatically, but subscriptions make a fashion label feel less special, less like something you chose, and more like something you're stuck in. Others fall back on discounting, 10 to 30% off, just to get people to come back. Except every discount trains a customer to wait for the next one, instead of paying full price again. The entire survival of this business depends on converting strangers into repeat customers. Most brands never manage it. If loyalty is really the only path to profit, why do so many brands struggle to earn it? The brand that costs more than the product inside, because nobody is actually buying cotton. A plain hoodie can be manufactured by 1,000 different factories for roughly the same price. What separates a $60 hoodie from a $12 one isn't the fabric. It's the story wrapped around it. Successful apparel brands spend 15 to 30% of their entire revenue on content. Photography, video, creative direction. A single professional photo shoot, with models and a location and a crew, can run anywhere from $2,000 to $15,000. And that's for one shoot, one drop, one moment of the brand's story. Look at Supreme. A streetwear label that built a valuation in the billions almost entirely on scarcity and perception, not on any technical advantage in how the clothes were made. People weren't buying a box logo t-shirt because it was well constructed. They were buying belonging to something. This creates a strange paradox. The less functionally different your product is from everyone else's, the more expensive your branding has to become to make people care. A founder who thinks they're starting a clothing company slowly discovers they've actually started a media company that happens to sell clothing. And once you've built something people want to belong to, something else starts happening almost immediately. The copycat economy that nobody can outrun. Zara can take a design that's trending right now and have a version of it in stores in under 3 weeks. Shein uploads more than 6,000 new products every single day, many of them lifted directly from small independent designers who spent months developing the original. Here's the part that surprises most new founders. There is almost no legal protection for the actual design of a piece of clothing. In the United States, clothing is treated as a useful article. Its main purpose is to cover a body, and functional objects generally can't be copyrighted. A landmark Supreme Court case, Star Athletica versus Varsity Brands, decided in 2017, drew the actual line. A graphic on a shirt, a printed pattern, an image that can be protected, the cut, the silhouette, the shape of the garment itself, that cannot. So a trending piece from a small TikTok brand gets copied and mass-produced within 2 to 4 weeks. Prices on the copy drop instantly because the copycat never had to pay for the original design work. the photo shoots, the months of testing. The original brand is left with two options: discount to compete or watch the moment pass them by. Even a genuinely successful design usually has an active shelf life of only 3 to 6 months before the market saturates with knockoffs. The better a product does, the faster the copies arrive. If originality can't protect a brand, something else has to. But before we get there, there's a much more mundane threat that kills more brands than any competitor ever will. The entity gamble that drains the bank account. Before a single sale, factories don't make one hoodie at a time. Most require a minimum order, usually somewhere between 100 and 500 units per design, just to make it worth running their machines. Do the math on something small. 300 hoodies at $12 each in factory cost. That's $3,600, paid up front, before a single customer has clicked buy. Now add multiple sizes and colors because a customer expects options. 3 colors, 5 sizes, 300 units minimum for each combination, and you're suddenly looking at 4,500 units and $54,000 in locked-up capital, sitting in a warehouse waiting to become cash. If those hoodies don't sell the way you predicted, you can't just wait them out. You have to liquidate, often at 50 to 80% off, just to get some of that money back and free up space and cash flow. This exact scenario played out across the industry in 2022. When brands ordered heavily to meet demand they expected to continue from the pandemic years, and instead found themselves sitting on warehouses full of stock nobody wanted anymore. This is why cash flow, not profit on paper, is the single biggest reason clothing brands actually fail. Some founders try pre-orders to avoid the risk entirely, only taking payment once they know how much to make. But that shifts the pain onto the customer, who now waits 2 to 8 weeks for something they already paid for, which quietly erodes trust in the brand. One miscalculated order, in either direction, can erase months of hard-earned profit in a single season, and if you do manage to survive all of this, and the brand actually starts to grow, here's the twist nobody warns you about. Growth is where most of these businessnesses actually break. Going from 100 orders a month to 10,000 orders a month doesn't make the business 10 times harder. It makes it exponentially harder because every system that worked fine at a small scale starts to buckle. At 100 orders, one founder can personally answer every customer email. At 10,000 orders, you need an entire team just to handle questions about sizing, tracking, and exchanges. Returns, which were annoying but manageable before, now become a genuine logistics operation, with reverse shipping and inspection costs eating directly into margin on every single item sent back. Advertising gets less efficient too, not more. The audience most likely to buy from you gets exhausted quickly, and platforms are forced to show your ads to people less interested, which pushes acquisition costs up even as you spend more. And all of this sits on top of a supply chain that can be disrupted by something completely outside your control: a delayed shipment, a congested port, one event nobody predicted. The uncomfortable truth is that plenty of brands are quietly profitable while small and start losing money the moment they try to scale. Growth doesn't fix weak points in a business. It finds every single one of them at the same time. The moment the whole system nearly fell apart in 2021, the global shipping system came close to breaking entirely. The cost of a standard 40-foot shipping container from China to the United States, which had sat around $1,500 to $2,000 for years before the pandemic, spiked past $10,000 and on some routes climbed well beyond $20,000 at the peak that September. Brands that leaned on air freight to move faster than the ocean backlog saw their shipping costs double almost overnight. Meanwhile, container ships sat anchored outside the ports of Los Angeles and Long Beach for weeks at a time, sometimes a month or more, as the backlog grew. Seasonal collections that were supposed to launch on schedule simply didn't show up. Brands had already spent money on ads promoting products that were physically stuck at sea. Picture what that actually does to a small business. The bills keep arriving. Rent on the warehouse, salaries, the ad spend already committed. But the inventory that was supposed to generate revenue to pay for all of it is sitting on a ship somewhere in the Pacific. Cash dries up while the calendar keeps moving. Some brands responded by shifting production back to domestic factories, which solved the shipping delay but doubled or tripled their unit costs instead. Others simply couldn't absorb the disruption and shut down. One global event, one supply chain hiccup, and hundreds of small, otherwise reasonably run businesses were gone. If a single disruption thousands of miles away can end a company, how fragile was that company to begin with? Where the money actually ends up follow the dollar all the way through the system, and a strange pattern appears. The businesses that profit most reliably from a clothing brand's existence are almost never the clothing brand itself. The Feta and Google collect the advertising dollars, whether or not the ad campaign ever converts into a sale. Stripe collects its 2.9%, whether the brand made money on that transaction or lost it. The third-party logistics company gets paid to store and ship the product regardless of whether it ever sells through. The influencer gets their flat fee whether the post drives a single sale or none at all. Even the factory, the one actually making the product, gets paid upfront through the minimum order requirement, completely insulated from whether the brand ever sells what it made. The clothing brand itself sits at the most exposed point in the entire chain. It absorbs the unsold inventory, it absorbs the returns, it absorbs the customer service costs and the shipping delays. Every other participant in this system gets paid regardless of outcome. The brand only gets paid if everything downstream of the factory works. In a very real sense, the brand isn't a manufacturer at all. It's a middleman standing between a factory that wants to sell fabric and an audience that has to be convinced to want it, taking on almost all of the financial risk in exchange for whatever's left over. If the brand carries the most risk and captures the least guaranteed reward, why does anyone still start one? The part where Loving Clothes isn't ask failed founders what got them into this business, and the most common answer by a wide margin is passion for fashion. Ask what predicted whether they survived, and passion barely shows up at all. Most new brands on Shopify shut down within 2 years, and it isn't for lack of effort or lack of good taste. It's because long-term survival in this business correlates far more with marketing discipline and financial literacy than it does with design talent. Founders who came into this loving fabric and color and silhouette often never learned to read the numbers that actually determine whether the company lives. Conversion rate, acquisition cost, lifetime value, how fast inventory turns into cash. Worse, emotional attachment to a design can actively cause bad decisions. Refusing to discontinue a style that isn't selling because you're proud of it. Reordering something because you love it, not because the data says to. The romantic version of building a brand quietly hides a business that is, underneath all the aesthetics, an extremely analytical logistics and marketing operation. Loving clothes and understanding the business of clothes turn out to be two almost unrelated skills. If passion alone doesn't decide who survives, what does? What this business actually is underneath the clothing the brand that make it past the 3-year mark tend to share one trait that has nothing to do with fabric. They behave like media companies that happen to sell clothing, not clothing companies that happen to make content. Look at Nike. The company spends billions of dollars a year on storytelling, on culture, on athletes, on narrative, far more than it spends distinguishing the technical construction of one shoe from another. What Nike is actually selling, most of the time, is a feeling of identity that the shoe happens to deliver. Brands that survive this build something they actually own. An email list, a social following, a direct line to their own customers that doesn't require paying an advertising platform every single time they want to reach someone. That owned audience is the real asset, not the inventory sitting in the warehouse, not even the logo. The trust of the people who already chose to pay attention. For those brands, the clothing itself isn't the business. It's the final step of a funnel that starts with attention and ends with a transaction, which finally answers the question this whole story has been circling. Clothing brands fail at the rate they do because most founders think they're starting a product business, when what they're actually building, whether they realize it or not, is a system for capturing and monetizing attention. The hoodie was never really the business. The audience was. The two was this actually plays out picture the optimistic version. A brand nails its first product, keeps landed cost under $35 on a $60 item, keeps acquisition cost under $30 because organic content and word of mouth are doing real work, and gets a decent chunk of customers to buy a second and third time through email marketing instead of paid ads. Under those conditions, a brand doing roughly $2 million a year in revenue might net somewhere around $150,000 to $200,000 after every cost is accounted for. Genuinely good. Genuinely possible. Plenty of brands hit exactly this. Now picture the realistic version, the one that plays out for most founders. Acquisition cost creeps toward $50 because the ad platforms keep getting more expensive and less accurate. Returns run closer to 35% instead of 20%. A shipping delay or a bad inventory bet ties up $60,000 in stock that has to be liquidated at half price. That same $2 million brand doesn't net $200,000. It might net nothing. It might lose $50,000 to $100,000 in a single bad year, entirely because a handful of variables outside the founder's control moved in the wrong direction at the same time. The difference between the good year and the bad year isn't 10 or 20%. On a brand this size, it can be the difference between $200,000 of profit and $100,000 of loss, a swing of roughly $300,000, built entirely on costs that never appear on the price tag of a hoodie. That's the real economics of owning a clothing brand. Not the 80% margin printed on the label. The 5% margin or less that survives everything standing between the factory floor and the customer's closet.